This is called a Type 37. There's the big brother's the Type 35, most people know. These replaced the Brescia. They started them in 1924, the 8-cylinder version, and then they introduced this 4-cylinder version in 1926. It was completely rebodied in 1960, but it turns out the original body survived. So I bought the hood, the side plates, and the front back. These are all original to the car. The tail and cowl are on a car in Texas. But this is an original tail I got out of Santa Cruz. So it's an original Bugatti tail, and then that original belly pan's in there, so that'll get integrated on. So as far as Bugattis go, it's much better than average. Because you have to remember, they're old race cars. The bodies were usually tossed off of them. So to have the original bonnet on it and the side plates, and especially that apron, that's pretty rare. It needs a spare tire put on the side. I haven't put it on yet. I mean, the 8-cylinder ones are faster for sure, but they're pretty exhausting to drive, manhandling them around. They're pretty heavy, the front. Bugatti took the Brescia idea, but changed it quite a bit. Instead of sitting on top of the frame, you sit more down between the frame rails in these cars. So they ended up having a much lower center of gravity. They had very nice brakes on them. The Brescias weren't so great. And just a very well-engineered, stiff chassis. The first versions have big 8-cylinder engines, which they're the faster ones. A lot of people really like them, but they are front heavy. They take a lot of work. You can talk to people who race them or tour them. So a real popular one is the Type 37, which came out a couple years later. This one's from 1926, and it has a little 4-cylinder engine in it. Typical Bugatti though, single overhead cam. This has 3 valves per cylinder. And this one was converted in the 1960s using all original parts. In fact, we even know what car this blower came off of. So they added the compressor here, because normally it would have just had a single carburetor here, but instead they put this big supercharger on, which substantially increases the power by about 50% or so. So this thing's probably, well, it's more power than they put out in Era, because we can run higher octane gas now. This one's probably about 110 horsepower. And probably do about 110 miles an hour. The fastest one of these, Type 37s, 37A actually, for the supercharged one, they call it an A, did 122 at Brooklands. So pretty quick cars. As I said, this one's not tuned so highly, so it's probably a 110 mile an hour car, so something like that. I haven't taken it to that speed though. I don't really plan to either. Kind of a chicken that way. There we are. But they drive remarkably well. It's one of those cars that's like an extension of yourself. You know, why do people like these things so much? A good friend of mine, runs the Miller Offie website, Harold Peters. I let him drive it once, and he didn't want to like it so much, he said, because he knew he would want one. And as he said, I thought it was great the way he put it. It's one of those cars, the more you drive it, the more you want to drive it. It's like, they call them per song. It means pure bred. That's where it comes from. They're like a little thoroughbred horse.
Well, Ed, thanks for spending some time with me today. Tell me a little bit about how you knew you were a car guy in the younger years.
My grandfather was into it. My dad understood cars quite a bit, so it just seemed like a natural path to follow. And then I got obsessed with these high-revving, smaller engine cars, Alfa Romeos, Lancias, Cisitalias. I was exposed to all these old magazines you could find. The first car was the TR3. I was so ignorant at the time. I thought, oh wow, these old British cars, they have wood floors. Well, I was so ignorant. It had no floors because they were rusted out and it was plywood. And the thing was so rusty, it almost fell in half. And then finally the oil pump, a bolt got sucked up in the oil pump. You know, this is like total idiot. I'm driving around and, oh, that knocking sound, that must be what they called knock. Well, if I bothered to look at the oil pressure gauge, I would have seen it was 0. So my moment of glory, passing my friends in the school bus with this thing billowing smoke, the engine seizes up. Luckily, as I'm passing a friend's driveway and I coast in, and that was the end of my first car. So as I tell people, I never learned, though. I keep buying these old cars.
Tell me a little bit about Lancias. You seem to know quite a bit about that mark.
I met this guy, Carter Hendricks. He's well known to some of the Alpha people. Had a shop called Quattrorute. He had this old coupe in the back. I thought, well, it's kind of funky looking, but it's neat. What is it? And he goes, that is a Lancia Aurelia. I go, oh, what's that? You know, he says, oh, they're the world's first V6 production engines, an early unibody. And they're important cars because they're one of the first cars also designed to take radial tires. And Jano, the great Italian engineer from Alfa Romeo, he was at Lancia at the time, and he had a young engineer, Virgilio, who did the engine, but Jano supervised the whole thing. So it's one of those things, no one part looks that spectacular, but when you put it together, it works much better than it should. Like their specs off the line, 0 to 60 is nothing to get excited about, but once they're rolling, they're really quick cars. They have very good aerodynamics. They also call them the Aurelia GT, just GT for Gran Turismo. It's the first car to be called a GT. It defined the whole term. You know, you see Ferrari GTs, Mustang GTs. That's the origin of the name. They started in 1906. They're one of the oldest car manufacturers in the world. And Vincenzo Lancia started it, and he just, again, he had this sense of balance. His cars were rarely the most powerful, but for some reason they could win races. He understood how to design the whole package. And oh, the Mille Miglia is coming up in a couple months. Maybe we should enter one of these cars. So these are like street cars. So they enter them in the Mille Miglia almost as a joke. Well, they beat every Ferrari, Maserati, Alfa Romeo except for one. Only one Ferrari gets ahead of it. And so they take second and third in these Aurelias.
So obviously it's benefiting the company, the racing success.
But it's just consuming all the money. It's a common story, the same thing that happened to Cisitalia. You go after this Grand Prix thing. It's what the dad said would happen, Vincenzo Lancia, that he knew that would happen. He was dead, but that's what he predicted, that Grand Prix racing would be too expensive. This is a 1951 Lancia Aurelia GT, Gran Turismo, also called a B20. It's serial number 16, and it's one of the 98 prototypes built by Bugatti. As I said, it has an aluminum doors, trunk, and hood. It actually has aluminum bumpers that are sitting over there. So the later cars are like 400 pounds heavier. So although these engines weren't as powerful, they're not that much slower. Actually, 0 to 60 is not that much different time-wise. But they handle exquisitely well. They have a transaxle in the back, inboard drum brakes, so they get 50-50 weight balance. Howard Moon, a Lancia historian, claims it's the Briggs Cunningham car, one of the first ones to come into this country. I don't have proof, though. Being an engineer, always got to be careful not to claim something unless you have definitive proof. It may have racing history because it has a plate covering a floor shifter hole, which they would have used for competition, but it's column shift right now. But it's the 16th one built. It's one of the earliest surviving ones. There's 2 others I know of that are lower serial numbers. Pretty important that way. 500 of these made total, but the first 98 were built by Bugatti. Those are the prototypes. And then the cars became so popular, little Bugatti company couldn't keep up with the demand, so Pininfarina took over the contract and built the remaining 402. But they're pretty rare. Not many first series ones survive, especially the prototypes. This is a Cisitalia, and that word, people think it's a disease or something. It's actually a name of a car company. It's CIS of Italy, Cisitalia. It means Consortium of Industry and Sports of Italy, so it's a made-up name. But these are important cars historically because they pioneered the use of a multi-tube space frame. They're the first ones to do it. In fact, there's one in the corner there. It's called the D46. The D was for Duccio, the name of the owner, and 46 for the year they introduced them. They were actually designed during the war. They did really well in the single-seat racing, so he wanted to take advantage of the enthusiasm for his cars and make a production car that people could buy. So he had it widened, the multi-tube space frame, widened to hold 2 people. And because of the space frame, they were able to partially assemble engine here. You can see the tubing there. It's all chrome molybdenum space frame. And they used the smaller Fiat-based engine that they modified extensively, more than doubling the power. They could drop the engine into the frame that has a dry sump, so they could get the engine low enough to have a hood lower than the fenders. It's the first car that way. And there's one in the Museum of Modern Art. It's the only car on permanent display because they say it defined the Italian school of thought. This car came in the United States in late '51. It was featured in December '52 Road and Track, and it was also shown in 1952 at the International Motor Show in New York. I know Americans don't really know much about these They go nuts over these things in Italy because this is it's sort of the Mona Lisa. It set the whole Italian school in motion. Ferraris, early Ferraris, these come out before Ferrari, you have to remember that. The first one in 47. The rear of a lot of Ferraris, 212s and things, they're exactly the same. They use the same wood bucks. Pininfarina did them both. The son was left running the company at that point because the dad had been lured to come to Argentina to work for Juan Perón to make to make a car company in Argentina. In fact, when he left Italy, what do you do to your creditors? Well, you take all the parts with you in containers. So that's why there's so many parts for these cars in Argentina. So I went down there 4 times over years to get parts for these cars and study other ones, and became friends with Sergio Lugo. It was sort of my equivalent down there, another insane older guy that was totally into these cars. Pininfarina considered it one of his greatest designs. This is a 1948 Cisitalia 202 Corsa coupe. You saw the blue coupe, that's just a 202. The Corsa meant racing, and it's one of 3 factory team cars. It was built for the Targa Florio, and then the Mille Miglia a month later it ran in that. It took 3rd place in the Targa Florio with Macuraldo driving it. Second place was taken by another one of these, the sister car driven by Taruffi, and Biondutti won in a new car called Ferrari. That was one of their early road races. Competition got good fast. Remember, there was a very brief period, late 47, early 48, where these actually could compete with Ferraris. But then Cisitalia got distracted onto their Grand Prix race car project, and if they'd put better engines in these even more powerful ones, they could have stayed competitive. So they were, by the late 40s, 49, they weren't very competitive anymore. There were 3 of these team cars built, and they actually all 3 survive. There's this one. The sister car to this one was in Argentina for years, and I studied it. It's now in the Netherlands. A gentleman over there owns it. And the 3rd one is in the Toyota Museum in Japan. Of the 3, this is the only one that has its original cast grille that survives with the extra lights in it. See the racing brakes on it that are drilled for lightness, the holes in there for cooling and reduce the weight. It has the extra holes here to ducting air into the brakes, and then the cooling fins, the gills in the side. For little engines, they cranked out an amazing amount of heat. The electronics were not always the most reliable in that period of time, so it would be possible that the electric motor could fail on the main wiper. So then there's a little manually operated one. The driver has a handle back here he can grab. So just in case he loses his electrical powered windshield wiper, he can keep going. Yeah, these early race car ones, they had no speedometer. They were just pure race. Just has a big tack there. Right now, here's the, what's in here? Oil pressure, ammeter, and then it has a water temperature and oil temperature gauge. It doesn't even have a gas gauge. They just would figure out how long they could go and refuel when they had to. Sandro Benelli is compiling all the surviving Mille Miglia cars that are known to be authentic, and this car's in here. Here it is in the Mille Miglia here in 1948, being pushed up towards the inspection in Brescia. They have this original paperwork here, this folder. And then what else does he have in here? There it is, queued up there. That's the driver, Macuraldo. But I have the original paperwork with it. Here's the original entry form for the Mille Miglia. I also have it for the Targa Florio. Here's the 3. I mentioned there were 3 of them made. So here's the 3 factory team cars. Here are the 3 Corsas. They also had their Streamliner up here and a couple of the Roadsters here. This is this car here, number 107. There it is there. And then this is their Aerodynamica that Savanuzzi designed, and here's one of the little Roadsters that they made.
And this car is up in the left there?
Yeah, that's this one, number 107.
And is that it right there?
Yeah, this is it here, and then this is it here. They wanted a photo how it looks today, so pushed it out in the yard.
Tell me a little bit about your passion for belly tank racers.
Ah, okay. Yeah, it is off to the side from what I usually collect. I usually like underpowered little cars. But probably I liked Flash Gordon a lot as a kid, and they're sort of the same shape as those spaceships. What kid doesn't like it? They're as you know, the drop tanks from the P-38 Lightning, so they have this natural aerodynamic shape, and it's just kind of a romantic period of Americana. These GIs coming back from World War II, all traumatized, just trying to live life again. So essentially, they're hot rods that they cram all the parts into the streamlined belly tank, and I like that Yankee ingenuity that went along with it.
So they'd take them to the Bonneville salt flats or lake beds?
Yeah, good question. Actually, pre-war, the Southern California scene, that was a real hotbed of the early hot rodding. It predates these belly tankers, as we call them, because of the belly tank on the airplane. And they would go out to Muroc Lake or El Mirage Lake. Muroc got taken over by the military during the war. That's where Edwards Air Force Base is. So they shifted over to over to El Mirage.
In California?
Yeah, it's about 125 miles out of Los Angeles, up in the Mojave Desert. And it was after World War II, they would take these hot rods, and a guy named Bill Burke had seen these belly tanks sitting, truly, they were the fuel tanks, sitting on the docks in the Philippines when he was stationed there. And he took measurements. He was an avid hot rodder, and he goes, shoot, a fella could put an engine in one of these. So he went back and started building them. The first one was a smaller tank off of a Corsair. It's like 160 gallon, I think. And so it didn't fit real well. He kind of had to sit on the drive shaft, and it was sort of perched on the top of the thing. But then the definitive one is the big one off the P-38 Lightning. It's, let's see, 310. Some people say 315 gallon, but actually mine's stamped 310 on the side. And that's a bigger tank. It's 3 feet diameter, so you can shove a nice big Ford flathead in there, a water tank. You don't have a radiator because there's no airflow in your seat. So essentially you're sitting out over the front of the thing almost. It's a unique experience driving it. It didn't occur to me until I took it out the first time to the Alvord Desert. I'm driving it. It's such a different feel. This push from the back. You can see, wow, there's an engine like 1 foot behind me. And but it's a unique feel. The only car I could think of similar reading about is the auto unions before the war, because that's the other mid-engine race car. And I've talked to other automotive experts. Are there other mid-engine race cars? And people scratch their heads, and it seems like it's auto union, and then these crazy belly tanks. They're the next mid-engine race car.
So how fast do they get going?
The first ones, let's see, Bill Burke, he did in the low hundreds initially, but pretty rapidly, they're hitting 150s pretty easily. Normally aspirated, they were getting close to 200. They couldn't quite do it. So then crazy guys started putting, like there's one that survives called the Salty Shaker. And it's a remarkably original car. It's on the East Coast. And it has a V8. I can't remember if it's a Chrysler engine or Ford, but they put a blower on this thing. It's got this huge supercharger at the top. And if you saw this thing, Mike, it's terrifying. It looks like two rickety old pieces of angle iron with a seat and this gigantic engine in the back. The guy did like 240 miles an hour in the thing.
So how fast did you get your belly tanker up to?
I have a Wimp. We're putting it together on the way to the lake. It had never been driven since, 1953? And so it's totally untested. So I only went up to about 80 miles an hour, but it was plenty fun. Here's the belly tank. It was built by a fellow named Tom Forniciari and his father Felix, and they had their friend Everett Adams help build it. And the car, it still has its original paint. You can see it in old photos he gave me. He gave me 3 photos of the car. Much of the car was missing when I got it, but thanks to him, he made a punch list of everything I needed to find for it, including the rear Evans cylinder heads and intake manifold. So I wish it had been something more common. It would have saved me a lot of time and work, but I finally found those. But so we faithfully reconstructed it, put back what was missing. So it has a big old Ford flathead in there, bored out to about 270 cubic inches. They finished it around 1951, 52. They took it first to Lodi to Langdon Drag Strip, and they took it out, and they didn't have shock absorbers at the time in the front, and left the drag strip. Because when I first got him on the phone, he was like 88 years old. He goes, "Is that thing all dented up on the bottom?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "What happened?" And he said, "Oh, it left the racetrack and bounced off of a dirt mound." He says, "We took the engine out and pounded it back with hammers and pipes and put the engine back in so we could race the next day." That was that era. It has the rare Halibran quick change, which was missing. Greg Buller managed to find me one. You can get Halibran quick changes pretty easy, but these early Culver City ones are near impossible to find.
And a quick change, what does that exactly do?
It has a pair of gears in the back, and you can just remove it. It's called a quick change, so you can look in the back there, Mike, and just pop the cover off, and you can swap the 2 gears to change the ratio on the fly. So when they went drag racing, they would put the higher ratio in, and then they'd put the lower ratio when they wanted to do high-speed runs. Well, let's find out. You and I will learn together, Chris. Let's see. See, it stuck out. It was proud, and he had to machine it off in the lathe, but maybe this will fit. I need a straight edge, don't I? That doesn't look too bad. What can we use for a... Oh, thanks, man. That's great. Here we go. Got it figured out, Chris. Here we go. A drill bit. Okay. We can lay it across. What do you think? There we go.
They're changing the gear.
So look at... This is what it's going to push the case out, but it's hard. It'll work. I bet you it will.
What'd you say?
Oil. Yeah, you got it, Burger.
Well, yeah, they're probably, what, 50 anyway?
You want goggles?
No, I'm just going to go literally out and back and see if it'll run. Let's get the body off. All right. We'll just put it right there. How's that sound? Yep. All right, ready? Yep. Okay. See if it runs.
That'd be a good place to start.
Yeah. Okay. All right. It's probably only a gallon at most in here now.
Yep.
Okay.
Give me that.
If something happens, I don't have tons of gas around me, right, Ken?
Always a good call.
Yeah, seriously. All right. Perfect.